welcome to Candybar, Antlerboy, a series where I, Mike Rapin, discuss the Netflix original series Sweet Tooth, live on the I Read Comic Books Discord stage with anyone and everyone who wants to chat. Every week we'll be discussing one episode of the TV series and chatting about the comic of the same name by Jeff Lemire, originally published by Vertigo Comics. Now let's get into the show. Danny, you're back. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 6 of Sweet Tooth.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me once again. Yeah, I'm ready to talk about this episode because I was trying to take notes.
But
then it didn't happen.
Yeah, I definitely can understand that.
I think that's my main takeaway from this episode. That I don't know that you need notes for this one.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot happened. To say the least. The other part of that is, I guess let me get into things. Episode 6, Stranger Danger on a Train. That's the name of the episode. 43 minutes long. I should say full spoilers coming up for episode 6 of Sweet Tooth. You've been warned. It's too late. We've passed the spoiler point. I guess just to run through this episode, because I feel like of all the episodes so far, this one jumped around a lot. So maybe we'll try to keep things in like chronological order. I don't know. We'll just kind of go take it by ear. Or play it by ear. But, I mean, the opening of this episode is absurd, if only because it's, like, the weirdest shot, like, running behind a train sequence that I've ever seen. I don't know. Danny, what did you think about that? Because I thought it was a little goofy.
No, I definitely agree. That was one of the notes I did take.
Mm-hmm.
I just wrote down football.
Yeah, that's literally the same thing that I wrote down.
And look, I know Deborah was an athlete, but, geez, I don't know how fast trains are, but they were hauling.
I feel like my mental understanding of how fast that train was going did not match up with how fast they were running, and I think that's maybe where it felt a little disjointed.
Yeah, no, same here. I mean, I knew that they were gonna make it on the train because that's the story that we're telling, but
right.
Maybe there was a better way to show that you can catch up to the train.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, especially with them immediately revealing that, like, oh crap, like, last men are on this train. That was I feel like they could have maybe cut half a minute off of that train running sequence, but it's okay because we cut immediately from that to the like last bits of the previous episode where Abbott shows up at Dr. Singh's house with him and his wife are about to be burned to death. And man, what an intense scene, all things considered, because in my mind, I was like, oh, cool. He's here to like save this doctor who he knows can help him with whatever he's trying to accomplish. But no, he's just there for the book. And I was really floored by that whole bit. What did you think?
No, same. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker.
Totally.
I was like, he needs Dr. Singh. And based on our discussion last episode, like, we both thought that, yeah, he came to get Dr. Singh because the other doctor's not around anymore,
right?
Or whatever ended up happening to her. So yeah, like he needs a doctor, but he doesn't. He just needs the book. Yeah,
which makes me wonder, like, what's actually in the book? What does Abbott know about what's in the book that Dr. Singh doesn't, or that Dr. Bell didn't explain to us? And like, of course, there's a beautiful moment where Ronnie says, if you let us die, you'll never have the cure, which, like, this is probably one of the best conceits in all of, like, intense thriller fiction where somebody makes up a lie and it's just like, yeah, you can't kill us because all the knowledge is in my head, man. Like, what a beautiful moment. I love that bit.
No, yeah, she definitely, like, it was so well done that she got me too, because I really thought, like, everything they both said sounded like crazy enough that, like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Ghost
DNA is totally a thing. I thought that was great.
I thought for some reason they were going to be like, there is like this one hybrid out there that's special. Right. That's the key or something like that.
Right. Well, I mean, some of this stuff, and here's the thing that I think was really interesting about that scene, right? Like, Ronnie says to him, I didn't know that what you were saying was fake. I thought blah, blah, blah. I believed it. But, like, to what end? I mean, I think as slightly intelligent human beings who've went to maybe basic biology. Some of that stuff kind of makes sense. And you, as a person who's watching it, you might think, hey, that actually, sure, that totally could work within the fiction of the story. Obviously, like something like a ghost DNA is not a real thing, but at the same time, you never know because of how the story is working. And it's, there is a level of fiction to it. So I think this is one of those things that I think they've done as the creators of the show. They've done to try to mask this whole, like, is this real? Is it not? The idea that I talked about before of Essex County or Essex City being far away, but we don't know where, kind of adds this layer of like fogginess to things where someone watching the show can't go, that's not true. I don't know. That's bullshit. I like that they've added a layer of like half truths to everything to make it seem believable.
Yeah. And I'm glad. So one of the main reasons I wanted to come talk about the episode, because I wanted you to make me feel better about the episode.
Oh no.
And I think it's working. I think overall it's working.
Well,
and I'll
yeah.
tell you my main thing at the end. Once we get through the whole everything that happened, I'll
Sure.
tell you my main
Okay.
issue with it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess just continuing forward, we met Johnny. Johnny, if anybody who's read the comic knows, Johnny's kind of a pivotal character for some key moments early on in the first couple of volumes of the comic, so it was nice to see his character be a part of the story. I wasn't sure if this character was going to exist at all, or if they were going to show up much, much later, but to see them show up as this, sidekick kind of dummy character to Abbott is really fun, because we, like, as someone who's read the comic and knows a little bit like who that character is and how they become relevant in the story beyond just kind of being this kind of goofy little sidekick is really interesting. And I'm glad to see him show up, because he added a little bit of like dark humor to the whole thing that I think was kind of needed after a very serious moment where Dr. Singh is rightfully so going out of his mind about the fact that he was literally about to be burned alive, and his wife is like, no, it's fine, it's fine, we're alive. And while she's totally absolutely correct, I totally understand Singh's like worry, or Adi's like worry that we almost died, are you not freaking out about this? I get that feeling in my chest.
Yeah, no, I like the character of Johnny as well. I think he seems I mean, anybody that likes Pop-Tarts, I think they get good points with me. So
even if they're working for the villain,
they can't be all bad.
Sure,
I think,
sure.
If they're into Pop-Tarts. I did. One cool thing about Abbott was when he looked at Dr. Singh and raised one glass.
Oh,
Like one lens from his glasses. I
yeah.
was like, oh, that's cool. So he doesn't like, I don't know why. It's aesthetically, it was cool. I don't know what purpose that serves as far as the glasses, but whatever.
The thing is, as long as it looked cool, and I think that's what they were going for.
They keep building up Abbott, and I think I really hope we get to the peak Abbott stuff as we get towards the end of the season. I mean, we only have 2 episodes left, so I don't want that to be something we carry over into next season.
Yeah, it's clear to me, at least. It seems like the stories are all starting to come together very, very quickly. And I mean, in Gus's storyline, which I do want to jump back to here, even some of the random folks that he runs into are like, oh, Abbott this, and they just kind of trail off or they're interrupted. I think that's a really nice way that the show has been hinting at us, like, oh no, things are coming together. Like, these characters that you've been meeting, they're all very slowly coming together. I mean, even if we look at, I guess, like on the train, we run into what we find out to be one of Jeopard's old buddies from back when they played football together. His name is Jimmy, and but the thing that got me about that scene is there's just like a big wrench fight for no reason, like WWE style, 2 giant men just hammering at each other for a good minute and a half. I was 100% here for that.
As somebody that is a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise, let me tell you, wrench fights are a thing.
Right.
So that part was interesting. I like the character of Jimmy, but I don't like the way he was used. I think he was well done. But you really are introducing one more character that we like, so the team actually kind of loses something. But they don't really, because overall, net after the episode, it's the same group that started. So they didn't really lose anything. They just lost something someone they met along the way.
The thing that I really enjoyed about the introduction of Jimmy is that there's a good moment after they realize who they are, right? Then who's fighting who. There's a moment where we get to see Jeopard like be legitimately happy. Like I was so taken aback by that moment of him. It's like, oh my God, Jimmy! Like he's smiling and laughing. He's like, we used to play ball together. Like it was such a 180 for the character. I was like even more brokenhearted by how this all episode turned out with Jimmy and everything that had to happen. Yeah, I mean, like just the way that the episodes, and we'll get to it, I guess, but yeah, it's even more heartbreaking given the moment where Jeopard actually gets to be happy for a moment, just seeing a familiar face, which I think is something that, from what we've seen, it feels like Jeopard fears that. He doesn't ever want to see someone that he knows, because the only people that he knows at this point are last men from when he was a last man.
Yeah, and we get, I don't know, I mean, I don't know how long after that, but we do get some more insight into Jeopard and the people, like, is the loss that he's gone through when Jimmy kind of brings up his family, which was, something that obviously he hadn't shared with the group, and now it's kind of out there. So it feels like it's going to lead to more heartbreak, but it makes me understand why Jeopard is kind of doing what the decisions he's making and why he's making them.
And yeah, I'm going through my notes here, which are kind of like chronological. And the thing about this episode, like I said, is that it jumps around a lot, because in between this sequence, we see, we get a little bit of Amy and Bobby and I want to call her Pigtail, but Wendy, I think is her name. As they're kind of preparing, oh snap, the last men have marked our territory. We need to figure out how we're going to get out of here. We cut back to Singh and Ronnie, and they're like, there's a line that I wrote down that Ronnie says. She says, "You can finish what Dr. Bell started," which has quite the implication in my mind. Like, I'm from my understanding, Ronnie knows what's in the book and what Singh has to do. But she's trying to value the greater good in terms of, or maybe she's being selfish. I don't know, of saying like this could help humankind. But yeah, it's definitely. I was like, oh, that's kind of dark when she said like, we can do this ... together. Like, oh boy, like they got no problems hunting hybrids is from what I'm understanding.
And I've always liked any scene with just Ronnie and Dr. Singh, like when they're, even if it's just a conversation, I think it's really good. Like both actors really just kind of make those scenes work. The chemistry they have is really good. Even if they're just sitting there. And, Dr. Singh, he gets his diploma and starts talking about, like, when this whole thing started, it was only one patient, and then they kept coming in more and more, and then I had to go numb to it. Otherwise, I wasn't going to be able to work through it. Which is, like, it's just sad. Like, it really lets you know how much pain and suffering he's kind of gone through, on top of everything that's going on with his wife and his family. And did they have a kid?
Yeah, I think they had a daughter, if I'm not mistaken.
They did, right? Yeah, and I know they made they named, I don't know if they named the horse after the kid, which was kind of weird. Like when they brought up Trixie, I thought they were talking about the kid. And I was like, oh, do they still have their kid in the room or something?
Right.
But then they talk about being the horse. So yeah, it's the whole thing with them. Like I really like their relationship. And now that they're going to this new place, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully Johnny can help them out.
I mean, fingers crossed. We'll see. And yeah, I mean, like this. So we see a little bit of that. We see a little bit more of Jimmy talking, or Jimmy and Jeopard talking. He says, Louisa was still pregnant last time I saw you, which like my brain exploded. Right. I mean, again, I knew, I've read some of the comic, so some of this was already known, but like, I didn't know how far they were going to go into this with stuff. And so, there's an implication here that Jeopard had a wife and a kid. I mean, clearly he was married and his wife was pregnant. Like, we need to know more about this. And of course it gets cut off because, they're showing off the river and stuff, which to me, when they were driving over the river, I was like, that's the cleanest natural river in the United States I've ever seen. I guess the plague really did, or the sick really did change things for the world.
When humans aren't around to mess things up, nature heals. We saw that, what was it, the canals in Vienna? Like clear for the first time in years last year. So yeah, it's Unfortunately, it's all based on true.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And and this is kind of where like the episode starts to ramp up a little bit in the end. They say, oh no, we just need to find where Go-Grow is. We find out that it's a place outside of, quote, Essex City, which it looks like that's where we're going, folks. And we find out that Jeopard is a wanted man, and he has to go save Sweet Tooth's dog that's missing, because we got to add like a C or D plot to this episode. And this is where we get like the saddest moment in the episode, as far as I'm concerned. Like we get this big fight where they have to fight off the last men, and like Jeopard and Bear and Sweet Tooth have to jump off the train. And we didn't really talk about like the interaction between Bear and Gus this episode, which I don't know, I could take it or leave it. I feel like this character being around is really adds a dynamic to the trio, but it's kind of odd. It feels still a little bit forced to me, just like in the last episode.
This wasn't Bear's moment to shine. This episode was not Bear's moment.
Totally.
I think this was definitely a Jeopard, and Gus, even with his dumb decision making. Oh my! I'm glad they explained why the dog is so meaningful, because I was very upset. I was like, Gus is smarter than this.
Yeah. I mean, this is just more proof, like in the episode, that he's still just a little kid. Like I think when we watch television shows like this, we see these kids and characters a lot smarter than like your average child or your average teenager, your average adult even. And you don't think about the personal and like mental choices that people are trying to jump through. And even in dire situations, maybe this is the one thing that he needs to keep calm, and he doesn't have it. So of course he goes a little bit manic about it, and he decides that it's the thing that he needs to find in that moment. I mean, I understand being frustrated by it, because I was like, what the hell? Like it's just a sock dog kid. You're gonna go find your mom. Doesn't that mean more? But still, I think this is them, the writers of the show, showing, like, reminding you that like Gus is still a kid who just wants to be a kid, and it still has the same kid fears and kid desires that a regular 9 or 10-year-old would have,
Yeah, no, I agree.
So you could be mad at him, though. I'm not going to call you wrong about that, because I get the frustration there.
Yeah, and I think it just kind of comes from the rest of the episode, but like I said, let's keep going, and then when we do like a summary, I'll talk more about that.
Yeah. So in like some of the last bits of the episode, we get this big fight, and Jimmy has the most heartbreaking line that I've ever heard in a long time. Like, again, I was tearing up at the end of this episode, because I hate that this show leaned into that idea of like, hey, we just met this person and they're going to sacrifice themselves in order for the heroes to progress, and basically they get to stand on the shoulders or stand on the pile of bodies of people that fell for them in order to protect this kid, and we see Jimmy sacrifice himself, knowing that he's not going to win, he's not going to survive, these guys are going to kill him for helping this hybrid kid, like, and he says this line of like, my mind's changed. Like, it's so fucking tragic to hear a character that and you've watched an entire episode, who is clearly a little bit slower, sacrifice themselves under the guise of like, I am slow, therefore my life has less value. Like, what in the fuck? Like, I don't know. I wasn't as mad when I watched the episode, but just talking about it, it just makes me frustrated that seemed like, oh, it's a noble sacrifice because he knew that he couldn't help or whatever. Like, bullshit. Like, what's better than having one big guy to protect a little kid? 2 big guys to protect a little kid. So I don't know.
No, I completely agree. I mean, it was a very I don't want to whatever, it's been long enough. It was a very Hodor moment.
Yeah.
If you've seen Game of Thrones, you know what I'm talking about. But,
yeah.
Because that's all I could like as soon as I saw that shot, that's all I could think of.
Yeah.
But I like Jimmy a lot. I really like the fight at the end. Like like especially with the narration of the football announcer, and seeing how meaningful his career was.
Yeah.
Which also was his kind of detriment. So yeah, I like the character of Jimmy a lot. I just don't like that he was kind of brought and was kind of thrown away in one episode. But I understand it's a short season, but still, those are the kind of choices you have to make as a showrunner.
Well, and the thing I think was most surprising in that moment for me was the fact that I feel like so far in the show there hasn't been a lot of like sacrifice and really harsh consequences for like things. Not to say that there shouldn't be harsh consequences, but like even the little Civil War thing that happens, but that forced Bear out of where she was, there wasn't a lot of bloodshed. There was just like a difference of opinions, and yeah, they wanted to kill Jeopard, but at the same time, like, we didn't really see like the harsh ramifications that you would see in like a Game of Thrones or any other premiere HBO or AMC show, and I kind of feel like that moment, even with there not being a lot of bloodshed and gore and all that stuff, still is a pretty emotionally powerful like scene. Like I said, for all the reasons that we said, just like you said with Hodor, like it's a very powerful scene, and I worry that it kind of gets away from the quote unquote heartwarming side of this. Like, is there another way that could have been written that allowed Jeopard and Co to get away, and Gus and everybody, that wouldn't have resulted in like the implication that this character was just going to be killed, and again, that forces the story to be like, hey, maybe this character shows up later, and like, so be it, right? Let's take this idea of like Jimmy meeting this kid, and he's so inspired to help him and help his old friend that he hasn't seen in so many years. He gets captured, and then at the end of the day, when Gus goes and becomes the hero or whatever the story's going to lead us to, Jimmy shows up and is there like, yeah, kid, remember when we had that moment together? That's why I'm here. Like, sure. I mean, and again, maybe that's what's going to happen. Maybe Jimmy doesn't get killed, but I felt like the way that they structured the end, it felt so dark.
I was just thinking like, I guess we're just assuming he's dead. We don't know that he, like, as you were recapping that, I was like, maybe Mike's right. Maybe he's not dead.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things where like, if you don't see the body on screen, are they actually dead? It's that right. Trick.
Yep.
Unless you're the unfortunate character of Nancy, who just gets kicked in the face by a horse. Sorry, Nancy, but and I guess so. That was my big gripe, honestly, with this episode. And I did like the last chunk of this episode, which was the story about Amy, story about Pigtail and Bobby, and we did see Bobby and those folks like kind of like notice that, oh shit, the last men are onto us. We need to do something, and that last sequence of the episode with Amy gathering up all the kids, and her and Pigtail and Bobby just grabbing all this stuff and saying, okay, we've got to get out of here. We've got to prep this place. We've got to get the hell out. The last men are coming. And we get to see a handful of more hybrids, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yep.
But we also got that wonderful narration from the narrator about, his line of, it's hard letting go. And of course that applies to many things in this episode. And again, I can't really fault the writers for like trying to tie up a bunch of parallel things, because that it all makes sense. And I don't think that makes it a bad episode. But it could have been, changed in some ways. But I liked that It's Hard Letting Go hits really perfectly in all three of the storylines, as Amy's letting go of the kids, as Jeopard has to say goodbye to his friend, as Dr. Singh has to move on to a new life. Like, all of that gets tied together really, really well. And seeing the wraps on the stories come together like so perfectly, I think ultimately redeemed this episode in a lot of ways for me, where I was kind of feeling lukewarm on it. I really liked the way that it ended, seeing those kids come out, and as someone who's read a little bit more into the comic, we kind of know where those kids are going to end up. I was like, oh snap, it's actually happening. And of course, we get the final bit of the episode where Gus, Jeopard, and Bear all show up at Essex City, and we know what the hell's in there. We know what Essex City's all about, so we're getting close.
I'm ready to see what's next. I think the way I kind of felt about this episode was, it felt like a bottle episode, but there was 3 bottles.
Yeah.
And like the first few minutes of the episode, each story were pretty interesting because it's picking up threads that we left off in the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last bit of it is also very exciting because it's giving us some closure to all 3 of the stories, and we can see the parallels between them. But everything in between was like, oh, we're just hanging out on the train. We're just hanging out while we're packing.
Right.
Or and then we're just kind of watching these dudes on the camera while we get ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a lot of characters waiting to react, which is kind of what threw me off. I was like, well, I don't like the middle of this. It was just like, if you want to see more of these characters, that's what you're giving me. But I don't know. I think I feel better after talking about it because there's definitely a lot more stuff in the middle, but it just felt like the middle of all 3 stories was kind of like, let's just wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
And then we'll close out the third act.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because upon reflecting on it, I didn't really see it that way, but you're absolutely right. Like everyone's in a contained area where they don't leave, and I think Amy's story has been like that since we met her. But with the exception of like she went out with Pigtail and they kind of explored the city and got supplies and stuff. Dr. Singh has been able to move around the neighborhood, but he's been trapped in his house the whole episode, and then of course the group on the train. That being said, I feel like it was a preparation for the end of the season. It is basically getting everybody to their final points this episode. And I think they needed to in my mind, I feel like they had to round out some of the character storylines to get us to this point of desperation in some cases, right? Like Amy never would have wanted to send the hybrid kids away, but, because her TV screen showed one after another, like 3 guys just randomly raiding outside for an indeterminate amount of time, that means the kids had to go. Dr. Singh, realizing that him moving on out of this neighborhood means a huge series of changes, and the implication that him and his wife have found himself in is that they have to find this cure. Like it sets us up for like a catastrophic potential of failure, or potential of catastrophic failure. Gus and Jeopard and Bear getting to where they actually are trying to go sets us up for the ultimate end. Is he going to find his mom or not? Or is something else going to happen, And I think, like, you're right, not a lot plot-wise happened, but I think that we needed this episode to develop the characters to get them to the points where they were, right? We needed to see Jeopard be reminded of his place, or his time when his wife was alive, reminder of his past. We needed Gus to actually have that moment of, I'm still a little kid. We needed Amy to realize that this paradise that she was creating is impossible given the harsh reality of the world, and we needed Dr. Singh to get to a breaking point. I mean, again, this is a reflection of the comic book in my mind, but Dr. Singh as a character in the comics is a broken person, is a severely broken person, and I think the Dr. Singh we're introduced to at the beginning of this season is a very wholesome, regular person, and I think we've gotten him to that point where he's going to become the character that's known for in the comic, and the implications of that are pretty terrifying, having knowing what may be happening in the future. So as much as I agree with you, it was bottle episodes, but I think that they needed to happen to get us to this bubbling point or boiling point.
Yeah, that all makes sense, but like I said, I think after kind of having some time to think about it and talking through it, like, there's a lot of important stuff there. I think Amy's character has been probably the one with the most positive growth, while Dr. Singh is kind of going the other way. And then I think it's interesting because this episode makes it seem like the last men are everywhere, but if you think about it, it's probably because because the 3 storylines are converging. So that they're actually very centralized to probably that Essex city area. And maybe that may be where they're moving, and that's why the train is moving all the stuff down there, and that's why they're going to get Dr. Singh from the settlement. So it's not so much that the last men are everywhere, is that our characters are moving towards the last men closer and closer every episode.
Right.
Until we have a confrontation. Yeah,
and I think that's just a heavy implication that the characters were actually a lot closer together than we thought. Which I like a lot. I don't know. I had a couple other points of just like what was good, mostly just 2 little quotes. One was, "Buck up, kid. There's no crying in the apocalypse," which I want that in a t-shirt, please. And then Jeopard saying, "We're going to do something stupid," I thought was a nice little moment in the episode.
Yeah. I think Gus learning I Spy and then seeing the animals.
Yeah, I had that as like are you kidding me? Like, are you kidding me that there's giraffes and elephants and stuff running around? Oh, that was too funny to me.
Freedom. We saw that horse at the end, which was probably my favorite, just like cinematic shot of the episode. The horse racing down. And it gives us a save the horse moment for Johnny. Right?
True. I mean, yeah, and he's not. I don't think he's a bad person. It's going to be interesting to see how that character plays out for sure.
Yeah, I'm interested in finding out more about his role with Abbott, and then everything going forward for sure.
Yeah. Well, I do have 2 last questions, and one of them's really big, so I'll get to the quick one first. Okay. How the hell did Amy go so unnoticed at this zoo for so long, right? Like, she got the little baby pigtail when she was a baby. and they lived there for what, 8-9 years, right? How old is that little girl? Like, how did they go so long without getting noticed? That's my big question. What are your thoughts, Danny?
Well, I think it's the fact that the last men were probably settled somewhere else, and now that they're moving there through Essex City or to Essex City, like now that the fact that they're moving in that direction, that's what now has led them to be able to find Amy.
Interesting.
I don't think they were around as much before because I think she would have seen them, and we know Gus and Pooba live overall far away. I mean, they have been traveling for a while from Essex City. And we probably know that the last men were closer to that area. So I think throughout the years that we've seen Amy and Pigtails grow and grow the preserve, the last men have been moving their settlement maybe closer and closer to them. So it's just a collision point now.
True. Yeah, I guess to your point, I think that's a really astute observation that you made about the fact that we're seeing the last men so often is mostly because of the proximity that they have been to, like, the path that the characters are taking. I think at one point someone said that the headquarters of the last men were like on the East Coast somewhere. I feel like someone said that this episode. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I think they mentioned they were moving south.
Yeah. So okay, so this all tracks. I think you're right. You're definitely right on that. Okay, so because my thought was like maybe she had just been living a quiet life, and the more hybrids she brought in, like the more noise and obvious it was that someone was living there. But I think your point is definitely probably more right than mine.
Well, I mean that could also be it. That could also be it, right? Because we did see what it felt like a trap on the last one, where somebody was maybe trying to confirm that there was somebody at the zoo.
That's true. Which, and thank God for Bobby. Thank God for little, tiny, loafing around, cute little Boy Scout Bobby with all of his tunnels.
The stuff he packed was so adorable. I don't even know what it was.
That's the one thing I do want to say before we wrap up here. I guess my last question is how, given how important trains are, wouldn't people just be lining up along the line of the train? Wouldn't they just live along the line of a train the same way that people live along rivers? Like, given how important these trains are, I was kind of surprised by the fact that it was like, there's only 2 ways to get on the train, kid. Like, come on. Like, I understand that, like, we're building the story off of existing civilization, but given how hodgepodge it seems that people have lived, you'd think that they would move, like, temporary little outdoor settlements, like, along the train line just so that they could have access to it. I don't know. It's just that's my weird little rhetorical question for the episode, I guess.
I mean, yeah, that's interesting because you have to make a decision as a society. Like, do you leave the current infrastructure that probably doesn't work as well for the mobility of a train? And so I don't know. It looks like a bunch of people decided, like, no, I'm just gonna stay home and we'll figure out how to. Like I said, electricity has not been an issue in this show at all. So
yeah, that's true. But yeah, I guess I don't know. It's kind of a goofy question. That's just my weird thought that I had at the end of the episode was like, given how important this train is, wouldn't people live closer to it? But you're probably right. I think, like, if rather than building a new house, why not just live in the existing houses, especially with the implication of how many people have probably been killed by the sick. Like, I get it.
Well, listen, after we finish the season and we have Robert Downey Jr. and Jeff Lemire come on the stage,
yes,
then we can have all these questions and hash them out.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That'll be the 9th episode of this season. But yeah, I guess my last thing was, I guess, Danny, you had any final thoughts from you, I guess, about the episode? I know I wanted to talk about the other hybrids that we saw. What did you think of that?
I need to go back and watch that in a little more slow motion. I think they hide the designs very interestingly because obviously they don't want to kind of give everything away, but they also probably
totally
are trying to save on effects. I didn't see many of the ones that looked more animalistic, except for the one that had like hoofs or something. Like the first one I walked by, one of them had like a face, but they all kind of look very humanoid as far as their shape and size.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm wondering what they really look like. I would definitely like to see them.
Yeah, my guess is you're probably right. They're definitely trying to save on effects. I think the very crafty way they shot those tunnel scenes as the kids were escaping through the sewers definitely proved that maybe they didn't have like all the same effects that they could have afforded for, our pigtail or for even Gus, who's just got antlers. Very minimal practical effects in the show that we've seen so far. I have a very strong feeling, though, that the last 2 episodes of this show are probably going to beef things up a little bit just to make sure that the season ends with a bang. So there may be more hybrid kids. I'm just guessing, though. That's just a complete guess on my part.
No, that makes sense. I think if you're saving the hybrid reveals, you would use them in the last episode when maybe they finally come in like contact with the last man and there's a confrontation there.
Definitely. Yeah, well, I mean, what an episode, right? Like, serious, getting into stuff. Like, that Jeopard reveal stuff totally took me, like, blindsided me. I didn't realize that we were going to get into his backstory, even just for the little bits. Yeah. Yeah, I was totally floored by that.
Yeah, no, it's same here. I didn't know. I mean, we learned about Bear. She had a sister, too, that we hadn't talked about, and we just completely overlooked that. Because it feels like they moved past it very quickly as well.
Yeah. It's been weird, the things that this show chooses to focus on sometimes when it comes to the characters.
But I feel a lot better about the episode now that we talked about it. Hopefully people that are listening that maybe go into this one not liking it as much get a little bit more out of it now that they've listened to our conversation. Because I definitely do feel more, just like there's more depth there than what I really felt at the first glance.
Yeah, I've been really trying to tear apart this show in terms of just like, what are they trying to get across? And I feel like, I don't know, some of the things are a little bit more obvious than not, but or a little more obvious just because I'm not trying to do a 1-to-1 comparison to the comic, but a lot of the comic stuff is just ingrained in my brain. So every time I see something that jumps out, I'm like, oh, that's an important detail. Oh, that's an important detail. Which I think has caused me over the last 5 episodes that we watched to kind of pay a little bit more closer attention and try to analyze things a little bit more.
Yeah, where I just kind of saved the show for like a couple hours before we record. And then I watch it and I just give it a little bit time to reminisce. Like, I just finished the show 30 minutes before recording. I want to go into it fresh and just kind of give you like my like really like straight up honest opinion of what the show was. But then we have this time now to kind of like let it simmer for a little bit.
Yeah, man. Well, I don't know. Any final thoughts about the episode beyond that then?
No, I'm super excited for whatever's next. We have 2 episodes left, and I think.
Oh man.
I know the last one's super long, so I'm pretty excited to just kind of finish the strip. I don't know what's gonna happen really, like, because I haven't read it, and I'm looking forward to reading the book too once the season's over. And just kind of keep going with that, and then I'll be pointing out things like, oh, okay, that's what Mike was talking about or whatever.
Yeah, well, you know, and don't you worry, that email's coming after the end of this season. For episode 8, we're gonna reveal everything. So yeah, from last week's episode. But anyways, well then, Danny, as always, thank you for joining me on this episode, because I don't think I could do this by myself. I'm glad that I've got someone here to bounce ideas off of, so I appreciate you showing up every week to do this, man. So where can folks find you on the internet if they wanted to ask you more Sweet Tooth questions or other things?
You can find me on my Twitter at Echo Spider, or you can find me at my YouTube channel and podcast, Next Issue Podcast. Pretty much everywhere, and just put that on the internet and you'll find it.
Yeah, and as always, you can follow me at Mike Rapin, and you can follow I Read Comic Books at IRCB Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. This episode first aired on Patreon and is possible because of our wonderful patrons. Join today for exclusive episodes like IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, Giant Days of Our Lives, and to get early access to episodes at patreon.com/IRCB Podcast. You can join these episodes live. You can come and join the last 2 episodes of Candybar Antlerboy by visiting our Discord at ircbpodcast.com/Discord. You can jump right in and you can come and speak with me and Danny about future episodes. And you can also listen to other episodes of I Read Comic Books as we record them live on Sundays. The IRCB Candybar logo is done by TheSamDS. Music for this episode is The Beautiful CS by Robert Farmer. I want to say thank you again to Danny, and thank you to everyone at home for listening. We really appreciate it. Until next time, comics are good, and so are you.